Yeah, we just ask people to do that in case there's any kind of like audio dropouts, all that.
Exactly. Yeah. It reminds me back in Syncom days, making short films for college.
Oh, really? Wait, what did you say? What days?
Syncom is cinema communication in short.
Oh, okay, nice.
It's like a degree I used to study back in college. Yeah, just making short films and soundtracking and doing Foley art.
Right. Yeah, and you got to get everything separately tracked and.
It was so fun, but a lot of sleepless nights, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, all that kind of thing.
That's part of it.
Yeah. And I memean, I guess we're sort of sliding into talking about this, but as we get older too, it's funny how like work habits change, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think about for myself, I was the same way. I'd stay up all night working on something, especially if you had a group of friends, the time would just evaporate.
Yeah.
But these days I can't, I don't know. Are you still like that? I can't operate like that anymore.
No, I think I was mostly like that during college for the most part. I can remember clearly that. I guess, yeah. First, like, because I'm 32 now, I would say between 17 and 23, 4, where I was like, go, boom, boom, nonstop. And then the idea of trying to be sustainable over time came to mind. And then I started to see what made the most sense and what was more effective to prioritize to get pretty much similar results subjectively, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's another funny thing too, right? Is that we modify all these things about our lives, our routines, our creative process, but it's all in the service of trying to get the same thing, right?
It is. Yeah, it's very fascinating. I've always explored that more than I've actually made music in a way.
Is that right?
Yeah, for the most part, I just question things more about my place and all of this. I try to see more beyond music as more of a what it is to be a general creative and wanting to approach everything in life from a very creative perspective, and not in wanting to create something new, but just keeping things playful for your life and keeping the wonder going and kind
of making your life the art, right?
Yeah, living it.
Yeah.
That's what they would say. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some famous quote, I can't remember who said it now, about, that make your life your art.
Oh, yeah. It's like, I feel like it's some jazz artist who said that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
You know, if you get well, I know about blues is if you don't just, man, I'm going to mess it up. But, you know, me and quotes, I think we're the same. We sort of just butcher it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
I'm like, me to say, me, no. Nah, you know what? I'll just stop right there.
Yeah, I think that's best. Are you in Montreal right now?
Yep. Born and raised.
You've always been there, right?
Always stayed. I'll travel, go over there to work. I'll go over there to tour. I'm sort of in the middle. It's the same amount of time for me to fly to London as it is to go to Los Angeles. So I sort of like this middle ground, and cost of living is very low. So it keeps my art very high.
Yeah, well, that's a great point too, right? Is actually, this is another part of getting older as a creative, is you start thinking about how much rent is, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And was there ever a thought, at any point in your career of leaving? I'm sure people were in your ear telling you, oh, you got to come to LA, blah, blah, blah.
All the time. Yeah. People were always asking me to come through. But never had the feeling. Maybe if I were to think about it more, it would have to be set for a very specific amount of time, but it would have to be an extraordinary kind of project where if I have to go to a certain location to build a show with Cirque Du Soleil or something like that, like something really far out, I'm like, sure, okay, yeah, I'll go there for like 4 months and we'll do some work and see where we can build and just stuff like that. But if it's just to like connect and do some studio time and more of the more traditional route of the music industry, I could do that in and out from, it's not too far. It's a quick flight. Yeah.
Well, what was Montreal like? Because the first time I went to Montreal was probably I don't know, 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. But if we take it way, way, way back from that, what was Montreal like as a kid? What was it like to grow up there?
So for me specifically, because Montreal, I guess, especially as a kid, it's pretty big in terms of different neighborhoods. You'll pretty much have a different upbringing. For me specifically, it's interesting because so you'll have downtown Montreal and you'll go towards the west side, and that's more where I live. And and there's a canal called the Canal Lachine, and that goes throughout the whole island. And so if you follow that whole canal, at some point you'll hit the neighborhood called Lachine, and that's where I grew up. And what's interesting about that neighborhood is a lot of interesting talent sort of came out of it from the same, like really close, not just in the neighborhood in general, but really close to each other. We were just like a few blocks away from each other. And what I found fascinating was that one of them his name is Justin Saunders, and he became to be one of Kanye's main designers and creative directors, right next to Virgil. And what's crazy about him is that he put me on game about the hip hop culture on a deeper perspective, in the way, because I was already a b-boy by that time, like 2002-3. I was already discovering hip hop. Well, what are the elements? Really, there's elements to this. It really felt like martial arts, and there's levels to it.
Yeah, and there's rules and there's traditions.
Yeah, there was something cool about that whole thing, and so I got myself involved in pretty much all the elements. Tried rapping, didn't work. I'll do it drunk with friends for fun, but instead I replaced the mic with beatboxing, and so I was essentially doing all the elements I could possibly do with it. And he then showed me how to apply all of this as a person, rather than I'm this now, I'm this character, I'm a DJ character, now I'm a b-boy character. It's more just like, well, who are you within that culture? And the way that he was able to introduce that is he has more of like a graffiti background, but he introduced like a little neighborhood festival called the Do It Jam. And it was all about, essentially, all the OGs would teach the youth everything they wanted to know. So you'll have a mural full of all the OG graffiti writers, teaching them different like flares and flare-ups, and flares like throw-ups, and how to do like straighter lines. And then the DJ would teach other kids how to cut, and then the b-boys would be there, the OG b-boys teaching up the youth, all at the same time, all together. And every year, cool. It was crazy. I couldn't believe it. It was like the whole renaissance of hip hop.
Yeah. And just laid out in this easy to understand
in this block
way.
Yeah, basically a block party set up in their parking lot because they own a hip hop clothing shop, and they were selling their own clothing line at the time. And so they decided, like, with the money that they could make, we'll put together this festival to help the neighborhood, the youth. And they were the first people to set up a legal wall for graffiti artists to just chill and do their thing and not be disturbed. And that really changed the whole landscape of that neighborhood. I don't know how it happened for other people outside of Lachine, but it was very specific for us, and definitely specific for me, and how I wanted to then grow up in my field, which is basically incremental in steps from going to one stage to the other, rather than reaching the eventual goal of this grand presentation. I want to be more process driven, which is what he was always about. So that it was really fascinating to observe how he worked and everything. Like, even to the extent of 2001 or 2, he was starting his own brand on the side, selling dad hats. And it was are you serious? He was selling pink dad hats, like pastel pink, pastel blue, and white. And he had his logo and embroidered cursive, JS, for his name, Justin Saunders. And that was like 2002. I was in grade 12 at that time, I guess. 11, 12. And no, I'm doing my numbers wrong. Because over here we have secondary 2. So that would be 6, 8, grade 8, I give it. Yeah. And
And that's ahead of his time too. The dad hats wouldn't get big in pop culture for a while.
I didn't understand. I was like, what is this? And he's like, oh man, it's the cool stuff. Dad hats. I'm like, dad hats? So when I see it now, I'm like, oh, okay, tight.
That's wild, man. Well, and I liked what you said too about, that you tried on all the different elements and you were interested in all the different facets.
Yeah.
And that there was sort of a place where all of them were on display and you could explore that. And I know just from, reading up about you and knowing what I do know about you is, you work in multiple disciplines as well, right?
Right.
I mean, you've been a b-boy, breakdancer. We were just talking about you worked on short films, all that sort of thing. Do you, these days, do you look at yourself primarily as a musician, or do you think of yourself more as kind of a multidisciplinary kind of artist?
For my own personal self, I've always seen myself as just a multidisciplinary artist, general, just curiosity, just trying to get into different things, because it all sort of interconnects. But I am very well aware of how music has connected in a much more different way from everything else, from all the different venues. That's why I've never really just been so separate. I'm like, okay, I'm all of a sudden I'm this. Like I said, I've always come from a background of incrementally building up different stages in my life. So things may take time and people may not see what's going on in the background, but for me, I'm living through it. So everything I try to present, anything they may end up seeing is no doubt that I've lived through it, because I lived through it first before having to present or perform anything. I never tried to then come up on the fly and like, this is who I am now. Like, yeah, that's not going to work for anybody.
Right. Well, that to me sounds like you've made a conscious effort to not be reactionary, right? And to be very
as much
deliberate.
as I can. Because sometimes we're all human, we cap at some point, but it's about being conscious of that cap and trying to use certain, cognitive tools to help deal with these different thoughts and patterns, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, have you always thought like that? Like, what kind of a kid were you?
Sort of like that for the most part. By second year high school, I sort of gave up on the whole high school idea of popularity. I tried it on the first year. I was like, hell yeah, this is it, y'all. I tried to grow an afro, fake afro, because I'm half Filipino, so it was sort of funky. It was like the funky Filipino, black Filipino afro. And little did I know, I needed a skateboard to impress the chicks. And I was man, this is what I need. And I'm like, all right, let me try it out. I got into skateboarding more than I actually got into trying to impress girls from skateboarding.
Right.
I initially bought a skateboard to impress girls, but then when I tried it, I was like, yo, this is pretty fucking fun. I'm going in with this. I don't give a fuck what they're saying. And by that point, that's when I also got into breakdancing. And I was like, you know what? This is way too fun. I'm done with this idea of trying to be like this bad boy, whatever. I'm just going in by next year. So by next year, I was rocking LRG, wearing a safari hat,
there you go.
Skateboarding, blasting like Busta Rhymes, Tribe Called Quest, just going in, man. I was like 2002, yeah.
How did you feel about school at the time, like academics and classes and all that?
I took what I found interesting for me. And everything else, I just made sure I could pass it to make my mom happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like to keep myself sane as best as I can as a teenager with all the different feelings and everything in those times. The best I could do was to make sure I got by, didn't fail. Nor did I get high marks, but I didn't fail.
Yeah. Well, that's better than a lot of people who end up doing this line of work, man.
Right? What I realized in that time was that it didn't matter the subject. It was just the teacher. Because I got into math, I got into history, I got into English, I got into all that because I had the right teacher at some point. Right. Once I had the right teacher, I was all in. And then my grades were up. That's about it. If it weren't, then I just try my best to listen and do what I can, and then I'll get just the passing grade, and I'll be like, all right, cool.
Yeah, man. Never. I mean, those people are so important. I mean, it makes me think about that mentor figure, JS, that you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
like that's a teacher, right? And if that person hadn't been in the place in your life when he was at the time when he was, maybe those interests wouldn't have developed the same way.
Yeah, exactly. At all. They definitely help shape your character over time, whether you know it or not. You just sort of realize it after you age and you look back and you're like, yeah, there's no doubt because of the amount of freedom and trust they've given me, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Do you feel like this just occurred to me, so I don't know what I think about, but do you feel like you still have teachers or still look for teachers in the same way? Because now I'm trying to think about in my own mind.
Yeah, it's good to thought. Yeah.
Yeah, in my own head, like I don't know if I'm as open to being taught as I used to be, which is kind of a bummer.
Oh shit, that's a good thought. I'm always open. It's crazy because you know what? I always tell people, Jacques Green, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I say Jacques Green is my OG, but he's like 2 years younger than me.
Right.
But he taught me everything about clubs, the club scene, and how to play clubs and how to DJ and everything. He booked my first gig ever. I've never went clubbing in my life till he found me on Facebook and through Rusty's Top Friends back in the day.
Nice.
And
shout out
hit me
MySpace.
He hit me up, direct messaged me, and he was like, "Hey, have you ever DJ'd?" And it was just coincidentally, I was working on my first ever set for somebody's house party, just for fun because they heard I was making beats now. So I was like, "Yeah, sure, I have a list right here, that playlist I can try out." It's like, "Sure," I did it that night. It's like, "Man, this is fucking great. Have you ever performed?" Like, "Nah, never," but I'm familiar with performance from breakdancing, doing choreography. I did a bit of theater too in high school, and so it helped me familiarize myself with what stage presence is, how much to carry yourself on stage, all that kind of stuff, all the technical stuff. And so I just applied that on stage when I did my first gig. And yeah, from that moment on, I mean, he put me on to how to use Ableton, and he put me on to how to use a MIDI controller that I use to this day, and MPD, and like a lot of things. So it's like, I guess if I were to look back, I've always made sure to build humility so I can be open to have anyone teach me, even if it's just somebody in the street I don't freaking know, and they're just like, "Hey, yo, check this out." I'm like, "Yo, what? Never knew about that. That's interesting." Like, I like to be the guy who doesn't know about it, so people are like, "No way," which is the opposite because they want to know about it. I don't care, man. I'm done with this ego shit. As much as I want to crush it. As soon as I feel that bit of ego coming through, and I try to flush it as much as I can because I'm trying to be done with it.
Well, that's a great perspective to have, man. I mean, does that come from, was that something you struggled with earlier on in your career, the ego thing?
No, I think it just came from where I grew up, I guess not like dirt poor, but poor. Yeah. Somewhat. And it sort of just helps put things in perspective. There's always that one time I remember when I was on my last year in elementary school. I was in grade 6, so I finished elementary school. I guess it was summertime, getting ready mentally for high school because I always hear, because my older sister, she already graduated by the time I was going into it. So from hearing of her experiences of like, ooh, somebody's popular here, all these different kind of things happening, all the structure in high school, sort of made me want to prepare myself mentally, be like, okay, there's going to be all this stuff. I'm going to have to be this bad boy, And then I started looking around my crib and I was like, oh man, this place is crazy though. I don't know if I can bring high school friends over here. I got a hole in the ceiling. I got a wire coming out that same night. My mom, she's a single mom, so she works day and night. And that night, she thankfully she was at work, but the ceiling fell in. And that night, I was like, shit, that really hit me. And I was like, I remember walking around the house and just thinking to myself, just looking around and looking up at the hole and being like, I could either feel embarrassed when I'm in high school about how I am, where I live, or I could just say, fuck it, I don't care. I'm just happy because I truly am. She's always given love, despite all the kind of bad relations she may have had with my father, all that kind of stuff. And but she's always had the genuine energy to express love. And I've always felt that as a child. And so I was like, I don't know, I feel good. This place is pretty messy, but hey, whatever. Food's good. You know,
there's always an upside.
Yeah, there's always that. That's the thing. I would always find an upside to things. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to decide here and out. I'm done. I'm just not going to stress it. If they think it's weird, it'll feel weird for me, but I'm just going to have to not care. And from that moment on, I just stayed that way. And it's always made me happy.
Yeah, no, that's really valuable. And especially to find that young, man, I feel like a lot of people, it takes much longer than that to find that kind of understanding, you know?
I know it's not like it extended itself everywhere else. I guess it's like I planted a seed and it just started growing and growing. And as I got older to who I am now, it really elaborated itself to something more concise that I could really read out almost, you know?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, maybe you weren't, thinking about it exactly that technically
but
back
it's
then.
Fascinating to backtrack and seeing it happen like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And to see how it was working. Yeah, I completely agree. And how did your mom feel about you doing music and you sort of going down the art path, which is not necessarily the money path?
Yeah. So my mom, so my father's Haitian, my mom's Filipina. So she's the typical Asian mom we all know about. And, which I do love because they keep a certain structure for you. I'm not going to, shade them. She obviously wasn't into it, but what's different about her is she always supported. She would always remind me to keep going to school, keep doing your thing, keep, not failing grades. She would try to suggest different career paths, but never be super like adamant about a certain path. She would just suggest things like, get into law. And I'm like, yeah, no, maybe I'll get into architecture. And I was like, look, I love math, but this is pretty serious. Maybe I'll get into art. And then art for her wasn't really, it's very like, I understand from the generation point of view. So it was just this balance in relationship of her always trusting me throughout. I think that's the only difference that changed everything, is that no matter what I got into, she would trust me. Like even when I was a young kid, 2 years into breakdancing, I was starting to get into competitions, and she would drive me to the spots. She would drive me to like far places that she would never go to ever. She would be like, no, it's too far, type of thing. And she'd be like, okay, because she sees the passion that I have in it and she wants me to keep expressing it. But I know she doesn't want me to become this professional breakdancer in the end of the day. But that's the thing. So same with music. So when I started making music, she was fine with it. Nothing different. Then when I started doing shows in Montreal, it's fine. Sure. Are you still in school? Yeah, cool. All right. And then I started touring, and then I had to quit my job because I was touring too much at that point.
Right.
Honestly, I don't know, to think of it. She's just been cool with it the whole time. She never was really like, but watch out or anything.
Well,
she knows it's very interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean that sounds like
she just trusts me, but she wanted to make sure I had a plan, or she'll check in with me to think, do you have any
monitor it, right?
Yeah.
Well, and so here's another question off of that is, for you personally, when did you always know that this kind of path was going to be your path? Or was there a point where, a switch flipped and you sort of realized, oh no, I could maybe make this my life?
Man. So I never would have thought this would be my path, for sure. Never in my lifetime, honestly. Because music was the last thing I had in mind, which is funny.
Yeah, that is funny.
Because if you think about it, so in high school, I got into theater. I got into just art, painting, designing, graphic designing, then cinema. And then I got into this art school and university to do just art installations and just weird artsy stuff, just to really go deep. And did all of that. And then started making music on the side because I learned how to design, I learned how to present things in a certain manner. And I was like, let me try that out. It's a fun way to practice your own skills. Yeah. And that's what I started doing, releasing my own stuff. And it's starting designing my own covers, doing my own shoots. And then that started picking up. And I never took that serious. I just took it as a hobby. And then even when I started doing my first tour, which was actually with Jacques Green. Oh, okay. I used to work at Urban Outfitters, saved up money to go on tour, and I got fired on the way back, which was fine. Got another job elsewhere. Yeah. Get jobs, yeah, typical. Yeah. And even then, I didn't think it was a thing it would be my life. It was still just, wow, I was able to go around with music, but I never discounted it either. It's just one of those things that just happen in life, and you just nurture it, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, oh, wow. What is this beautiful gift? Hey.
Yeah. Well, it's it's like that planting a seed metaphor you used earlier, right? But
that's the thing. Everything that sort of arises, I'm not just going to take it I'm not going to be conclusive about it. Like, I'm not going to make a beat and be like, this is a hit. It's like, no, I just make music and then I'll forget about it. And I'll come back and be like, wow, I made this? Oh, this is pretty crazy. And I love that feeling.
That is actually, you're completely right. That is a great feeling. Especially, I'll go back to things I made years ago, and I have no recollection of how I did it.
There's so much of my music, I have no recollection of what I've done. So it's bad when there's like times I have to explain on a musical tip where I'm like, I don't know. Everything is based off of emotion for me. It's instinctual in a way.
So did you have any musical background? Do you play instruments or anything like that?
My musical background goes as far as learning basic piano with a Filipino instructor. They're the best, man. They're like the kindest folks. Oh man, it's great.
I don't think I ever had a Filipino music teacher.
Yeah, well, it's the community, I guess, being around the whole family like that.
Sure. Yeah.
I would imagine they would end up, it's probably their homie, honestly. I learned playing the piano there. I didn't learn it. Well, it was funny though, because I could never read music, right? To this day, I still can't read it. I could just hear it and then play it back. And so he would play me something. I'd look at him play it and I'd hear it and I'll just play it back for him. And he'd be like, okay, but read it. And I was like, I'll be so slow. And he'll just like play something else. I'll play it again. And he'll be like, just read it. You have to read it. It's not going to work. And I was like, I don't know. I just want to feel something. I don't know. Yeah. So as I got older and got into production, a lot of my process, it comes from just an instinctual reaction to things. And that's actually, it's just funny. I just thought about it now because I'm only reactionary when I make music.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. I leave it only for that because it's just art. It's art. It's like putting a splatter on a canvas. Right. It's just reactionary. You're not thinking about it.
Right.
I hope the painter's not thinking about it, but that's sort of the idea.
Well, that's definitely when it's most pure, right? Is when.
But that's what I hope. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to express as much as I can. Yeah.
Well, okay. So I'm going to bounce around a little bit because I want to come back to some of these ideas. But what you just said is really interesting, I think, in terms of the pure intention and not overthinking it. Yeah. If we think about sort of the arc of the Tonight project, right?
Yeah.
Because that project strikes me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it strikes me, as two friends making something fun, enjoying each other's company, not overthinking it. Exactly. But then it blew up, right, into this big thing. And all of a sudden, there's probably a lot of external expectations. And I would imagine it's a lot harder to keep it pure after that.
Normally, it would be harder. But that was something I've kept in mind since when we first made our project, when it started, I guess when it got picked up by Kanye, because the Blood on the Leaf song is our first song we'd ever made together.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So he was working on a Bjork remix at the time in London. And I was in his studio just chilling. I guess I was on tour. I was taking a break, I guess.
This is Hudson Mohawke we're talking about?
Hudson Mohawke, yes. So Hudson Mohawke was in his studio working on a Bjork remix. And he finishes it. and turns around. He's like, hey, we've talked about collaborating at some point. And that's sort of how the project started. Well, sort of, it's pretty much how it started. And so I was like, okay, cool, sure, let's try it out. And I was just playing on the piano, and it was just a piano sound, and it was the melody. I was just playing around. And he's like, hey, that's pretty fun. Let's record that. Okay, sure. No thought. And then he switched the piano sound to horns. Da, 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 da. Whoa. And he's like, you want to add drums? Okay, add drums. Hey, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And then I remember Dominic Flanagan, one of the founders of Lucky Me, coming in. And he's like, the hell is this? I was like, I don't know. We're just making something. Jesus. And we're like, okay, cool. And we just kept it within our circles. And at that time, Hudmo was already talking with Virgil, and I think he might have showed it to him at some point, because then Virgil got it and then showed it to Kanye, and then Kanye was like, I need that for my next album, which whatever it may be. It wasn't even called Yeezus at the time. Right. It was just he hadn't even started, maybe. That kind of thing. It was really early, because he ended up using that song for his first fashion show, I think.
Okay, like pre-Yeezus.
Yeah. He used that one. Yeah. So that was pretty much that moment, because it happened in the background. The public didn't know anything about it. So it helped me to preemptively act on what may come later of the idea of people's expectation. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I then put it on myself to help work on making sure we stay focused on it just being of what makes us happy, and not have to worry as much as possible of people outside's expectations.
Sure, yeah, because that's a really good point. If you have that really great example of something you just made on the fly, just having fun, and see how far that goes, then why do anything else, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And did you end up out in the studio with Kanye when he was like actually putting Yeezus together?
No, not Yeezus. I was out there for. No, it was the compilation.
The good music.
Yeah, summer.
Cruel Summer.
Cruel Summer. There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Yep, Cruel Summer. Yep, it was that one. It was all thanks to Virgil. Really, he's one of the main architects to just put a lot of the people of our circle in connection with good music in that respect. He was just hit me up, and he's like, hey, I'd like to fly over, introduce you to TA. Sure, okay, let's do it. Got over there. It was Hawaii, and a beautiful complex. Everybody had their room. They set me up in a room next to Mike Dean's, actually. So it was very fascinating to just watch him work and the amount he smokes. I smoke a lot too, but now I can smoke as much. But at the time, he taught me better.
You had to work up to it.
Yeah. And to see the amount of work he does while doing that, it was absolutely fascinating.
That's funny to think about in the context of teachers. He just taught you how to smoke weed.
He did. Yeah, exactly. Because there were different levels to it. And then it's like going through space, and you're like, wow, it goes deeper? Okay, let's go.
That's amazing.
And it was such a good environment, man. It was very relaxed and creative, just nonstop. Not any kind of, because I was fearful of the crunch time type of culture you might hear of, but this was just like felt like a bunch of friends. Like I would just come back with a bag of McDonald's, and Hit Boy would be like, McDonald's, huh? Nice. Nice.
That's great. And would Kanye kind of just be bouncing from room to room, checking out what people are working on?
Yeah, it was fascinating. Yeah. He'd be so kind about it too. He'll knock at everybody's door before coming in. But it's just his complex. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just come in, it's yours. But it will always be a knock. So I would always think it's somebody else. And also I'll open the door and it's him. And I'll be like, hey. And he'll come in and he'll have an idea, and he'll be like, I got this idea, and he'll just run it off, and we'll just discuss and see from there, and just add some stuff, and he'll be like, yeah, okay, that's cool, and then he'll leave the room, that kind of thing. So
yeah, that's cool, man. Because I've heard about those sessions like where it's a whole compound, and it sounds really interesting in terms of like some like a Kanye will come in and just kind of like just one piece of what somebody's working on and take that one piece and bring it into something else somebody else is working on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. You can. There's so many ways to do it. You can just get one stem and be like, hey, okay, I want everybody to remix this sample and see what happens. That kind of stuff. And it's like it's an activity almost, it's like an event.
Yeah. It's a whole nother way of writing. I think it's so interesting to, I think about Kanye that way. I think about Diplo that way. Yeah. And there's a whole bunch more where what they're really good at is that their brain is sort of sees connections between people and between sounds that other people might not, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then they're able to actually bring those people who would never be in a room together.
No.
And that's where something really interesting happens.
Exactly that. Yeah. It's really, more and more companies are becoming more aware of that kind of structure and dynamic that they're trying to implement it for their own as well. Yeah.
You think so? Like, do you have any examples of that?
I did, because I mentioned Cirque Du Soleil earlier, it's because I did this like secret experimental project. They built a whole different complex because their headquarters is based in Montreal, and they built a whole different complex to just experiment with different technologies and different types of performers and objects and whatever they can use to try something completely new to then present to a whole Cirque du Soleil show. And a good friend of mine, Adam, he's a lighting director and a stage designer, and he's done a lot of work for Beyonce, Madonna, and Billie Eilish recently. So he's done a lot of big work for pop stars and a lot for the city. And it's amazing because we have this background of he's like he's like my OG. He's a few years older than me, and we're both from the same DJ scene in Montreal. And I would go to his parties a lot when I was younger and look up to them, like, wow, they're playing the coolest shit. And and one day he hit me up and he's like, yo, Cirque du Soleil is experimenting on the whole thing, and they love my lighting installation that I presented to them. They wanted a whole new take on music to perform on. And I thought about you and I was like, hell yeah, because I've always wanted to try something out with them one day. I was on a panel once, and the last question on the panel was me and a bunch of different producers, and they were asking, who would you like to work with and you haven't worked with yet? And everybody had a different artist, and for me, I said Cirque du Soleil. And everybody in the room were giggling. And then one guy came up to me and he's like, hey, I work at Cirque du Soleil. I know one of the main people that so it sort of implemented a seed, because then they eventually used my music for some of their internal ads and internal videos. And so the community there was starting to be familiar with my sound and the idea and knowing that I perform with my music. And so this became like a really good way to connect and try something totally new and something I would have never thought I could ever cross. And so I went all in. Yeah, we did a full 4.5 minute piece, and they got this really unique performer. The ones that balance on these two canes with their hands vertically, upside down, and she has these really weird non-traditional movements that were really fascinating to watch. And the whole process of just making the music and up to the final presentation was pretty much, I don't know, pretty seamless. It just took me like 3 versions, and we were pretty much there. And it was great too, because I could be there on location as they're practicing and change things on the fly if there need be. So it was really fun to just go all in, and we presented it to one of those like those business events where they show new technologies and what to invest in, blah blah blah. So we presented that show, and we've so far won 2 different awards.
Oh wow!
For it, and we're still are to this day. The second one was this like International Lighting Stage Design Award thing, and we won it over the Chemical Brothers, I think.
Oh damn!
I know. I was like, I got the call, and I was like, hey, that's tight. Okay. Yeah. And I was like, all right, like, you know how I'm saying the incremental incrementally building. And I'm like,
right.
I see some potential there. I'll nurture that, see how that goes, and we'll see there. You know, like
that's interesting that you say that, right? Is sometimes it's just about being in the moment enough to notice when there is an opportunity for growth, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that sort of comes to show that there's some companies are becoming aware of this dynamic. I mean, a good one is Red Bull Music Academy, and I was a part of that in 2011. There was no better example of putting all different producers from around the world together, and every morning we would have 5-star meals for free from amazing creative chefs. So it was creative from the moment you wake up in your weird, amazingly designed apartment and you go into this complex that was specifically made for the event, and you eat this food and you listen to this amazing music while you're eating the food. You're like, what is that sound? Whoa, what is this? Where are you from? It was intense. It was amazing, and unlike anything I could ever experience, I believe. And I'm just lucky to have experienced it, because now it doesn't exist. I think they stopped it last year or the year before.
Yeah, it went away. All that's going away, man. It made me kind of sad. Like even the Red Bull radio just went away like a few months ago, I think.
Damn.
Like right before quarantine hit and all that.
Yeah, it was such a different dynamic, man. It was amazing. You'd hear different music. You'll have like the best reggaeton producer producing amazing reggaeton in the room, and then you'll have this ambient producer has got awards, and then you'll have this bedroom producer producing just as much amazing shit as everybody. And it's unreal. It was unreal.
Well, and maybe we should just very quickly, for the people who don't know, because it has actually been a while now. Red Bull Music Academy. It was basically, they did it in a different city each year, right? And they would get probably thousands of applicants. Anybody could apply. The application was like fucking 50 pages long.
They showed me. I went to their offices one day because I was doing like a soundtrack for an ad they were working on, and they showed me the applications for that other year, and it was intense, man. It fills up wall to wall, and it's so many countries are applying. So for them to dwindle it down to 60, they're absolute wizards, because it's like you were saying, the people who organized that specifically, they have this ability to sort of understand you from the application itself, because the application has a lot of weird questions. So it's intense, up to you. Yeah. So it's really up to you to answer in your own way. And they somehow catch that. And they're able to then know, okay, this person would probably work well in this kind of circle of people for this first 30 people. And then the next 30 people, I think they'll all work together well too. They all might create something interesting.
And that actually goes back to what we were talking about of Kanye and all that. It's like putting the right combination of people together is half the battle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just finding the most interesting people; it's the most interesting combinations.
Yeah, it's crazy. I hope
honestly,
one day. I hope one day that comes back in some way.
Yeah, I do too, man. It's
in some other form. Doesn't have to be the same brand. I don't know, but it's a very fascinating structure. But it's been going since late 90s, so it's been going for a while. Yeah, no, they had an amazing run, man. It really did feel like an end of an era, because that to me was one of the longest holdouts from the whole mid to late 2000s era, which is where I come from. It's, we've been talking about it in your context as well. It makes me think about, the blogs and the the hipster culture and man.
Were you on the holler board?
Oh shit! No, I know about the holler board. I wasn't too active on it though.
Okay,
but I know so many friends on it. Yeah,
No, I was on there heavy, and that was sort of where I first started getting connected to anyone. In that scene.
That's how it was. That's how it was though. The forums, Scratch forums, and all that.
Well, and the parties, the regional parties, right? That was the other thing.
Yeah, that was the other thing. Well, that's sort of what it was when I was talking about Adam. His DJ name would be DJ A-Rock, and it was pretty much exactly what you're saying. It's its own scene that you would go to sort of consume, to get inspired, because it's just unlike anything else. You just can't go anywhere for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was this open spirit, right? Because you were talking about how you kind of got these OG lessons about DJing and playing to, different people and different sounds. And that is something I miss. I try not to be the old guy complaining, but I do miss now in a DJ set, like, I get paid a lot more money than I used to play a DJ set, which is great. But I also feel like it's harder to play a diverse DJ set in 2020 than it was in 2008,
How can I answer that one? Because I've never found myself feeling limited to what I play. In my whole career so far. Well,
what about, say tonight has a festival booking or something like that?
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's certain parameters you have to hit for that project in that setting?
Nah, at all. It has to make us happy. If it makes us happy, they'll feel it.
Yeah.
In any way. And it doesn't mean that they have to feel it in a happy way. They can feel it in a mad way. Like, oh, what the hell are they doing? Right. That's good too.
I did not sign up for this. Yeah.
Yes, because that's human. To me, that's human. What's not human is getting everybody so happy at the same time all together for like 6 hours. Like, no, it's not happy. Whereas like it's one kind of emotion. What are we, robots? Right. I like to get people to feel all types of emotions. And it's not that I want them to intentionally feel mad. I just do. And what I do makes me happy. And how you feel is up to you because you have the right to feel what you want.
Well, and I love that. And I think, you mentioned earlier that when you're DJing, I mean, you're also performing the music, right?
Yeah.
And I think anybody who's seen you live or seen a video of you performing, you know immediately what we're talking about. It's a very distinctive, and I think at least part of that probably comes from the dancing background as well. Yeah. I mean, it's a full body
it's a big part of dancing,
right?
Yeah. No, it is.
Was that something you just started doing, or was that sort of something you conceived of and then implemented, if you know what I mean?
It, I guess 2 ways. First way would have been it just started, and then when it was starting already, then I then conceived it and tried to conceptualize it in a more structured way to keep it more sustainable over time. Because I was wild out.
Right.
I get sore, man. Holy shit. Because there were a lot of different stages to that whole thing, man. Because on my first gig, when Jacques Green booked me for his own night, he used to call it his club night used to be called Bass Culture, and it was amazing. He was playing all the good Moscow and like old dubstep stuff, and it was crazy. And I remember doing the gig and playing, but at the time I wasn't using Ableton. I was just using a DJ mixer kind of thing. And so I would play one record, and I'm like, okay, well, I can't play the other record yet. So what am I gonna do? So I don't know. So I see my friends in the front. They're like, yeah. I'm just like, fuck it. I'll just dance with them. So I just danced with them. And then people loved it. And they're like, what the hell is he doing? Dancing with everybody. And they were like, that's unusual because I'm not from that world. So I'm just doing whatever feels fun to me. And because of that feeling so unusual, it made more people fascinated to what the hell is this guy doing on stage, wilding out. And so as I became more conscious of it, I then decided, okay, well, I started looking at it in a bigger picture where we're now at a time that the audience are facing the DJ booth rather than facing each other for the most part, right?
Yeah.
So if they're going to look at something, I'll present them something. And so I've kept this whole theatrical structure in mind for everything I've went from here on out.
Yeah, which is really, really interesting contrast, I think, because I think you were maybe even early on that concept of DJing being a performative art, right? And giving people something to look at. Yeah. But then, at the same time, a few years later, there would be this rise of EDM, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the production values would go crazy on the festival stages and all of that. And I feel like in that case, that's almost something you and Hudson Mohawke consciously tried to avoid to a certain extent.
Exactly that. Yep. We've avoided all of that. We kept it Broadway. It's how we say it. We asked our lighting designer, like, let's just use lights that people use in Broadway shows. Because they use the least amount of technology. They use everything traditional. Let's see what we can get from that and what makes sense, and then go from there and start designing on top of that. Well, like for my stage design for my own solo stuff, when I was doing 360, I went to go see Madame Butterfly in opera, and because they have really intense modern grand scale stage design. So I was interested to see that in person so I can see different angles. Because on a video, you're just set in one perspective. You can't really bend in one way and sort of see just over the hill right there. And a lot of that I would take note of and see how could I implement that in a smaller scale for my own performance, but to make it, but to also keep the whole thing cheap and small as possible. So for my album tour, I was able to tour with my whole stage setup all together with me and my tour manager, pretty much all carry on, except for just one oversized, but it was just this big. It wasn't that big. Those were just the frames we needed to install. And everything else was very simple lighting, very simple but intentional lighting. So it makes it seem like it gives a very big impression. So it was all very much a lot of this was taken from theater, and how they use all like the least amount of things to give the most biggest impression.
I could see that. Yeah, I was last night when I knew I was going to come talk to you, I was watching the video for Maserati again.
Yeah.
And you just reminded me of that, talking about, taking sort of the epic stage production and then trying to take that feeling and compress it into something smaller.
Yeah.
That video, for anybody who hasn't seen it, you should go watch that video. I'll link to it later. But yeah, man, it felt, very classical inspired,
exactly.
and modern dance inspired as well. But then
without being too snobby about it, because I don't know the details of classical history. You know what I mean? Like that. My whole thing is based off of emotion and feeling of it all. Because in that way, I'm not too limited in having to become a certain character. I can just feel it and just live through it. You know?
Another thing you just made me think of, talking about trying to get a lot out of using a little, is the idea of simplicity and sparseness, which I think, especially in the Tonight project, is something you guys have really dialed in.
We love
it. I mean, is that intentional, to try to really just use a small amount of elements and see how much of an effect you can get with them?
Hell yeah, man. Even the errors, we'll leave them in there sometimes. Like Serpent, I sort of bark in it. It's because our neighbor's dog was barking at us because we were recording so loud, and I was screaming so loud. And but hearing it play out, we're like, this is great. Keep it. Because it's all really subjective. You just don't. The people wouldn't know the final product. It's up to you to present the final product. So if you're stuck trying to find the idea of what's perfect to you, and you're just stuck on the same snare for 3 weeks, then it's like, well, by the time you present it, they won't know. They'll just take it as how they want it. So it's like, don't break your back on trying to be so perfect when it's not really a real thing. It's more about what makes you happy rather than what's more perfect. And that's what we're just purely focused on. And when we make the music, it's just all that the whole time.
I love that, man. Yeah, I think that project is really a true representation. Like I can hear your guys' relationship in that project. You know what I mean? And I think that's part of what I like about it so much. I mean, you must have met Hudson Mohawke a long time before that, right? Was that back in the late 2000s days we were talking about?
Yeah. When I was starting to play my first gigs. And by that time, me, Jacques Green, also my other OG, who showed me a lot of the ropes in the night scene, 6'2", he, Robert Squire, we all put a night together called Turbo Crunk. And
I remember that.
yeah. And we were all fans of Lucky Me, and our dream was to one day book a Lucky Me showcase and get Hudmo, Rusty, Mike Slot, and we did it. We got all those guys, and that's when I first met Hudmo. I would talk to him here and there, maybe on MySpace, but I was more just a fan, like I was just a fan of Rusty. And I wasn't signed to Lucky Me or anything either at that time. But that was when I first met Hudmo, and the first time I met him, we were both drunk. And I was like, yo, what's up? And he just grabbed me in a headlock, and he's just like, hey, how you doing? I was like, yes! I was so happy. I was like, yo, Hudmo is headlocking me.
That's amazing. Oh, man. Yeah.
Dude, it was so fun, man. Rusty was wild, and it was great, dude.
Yeah, I have to imagine all of them at that point. That was probably, they were just starting to tour themselves, right?
It was their first time in just in North America, or just in America in general. Yeah, overseas.
Amazing, man.
Yeah. So that was the first time, and we've always crossed each other during festivals, and then I got signed, and we've just sort of stayed all together, family since. Yeah. We've always, everybody, all of us just have like general relations, and we're all have mutual friends, and we've all seen each other over time. So that's what's interesting about Lucky Me. It's like that too is a very much incrementally based kind of label.
Yeah. Kind of a loose association where sometimes elements leave, sometimes elements come back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love that though, man, because to me, that's something you can always trust, even
exactly. Yeah. It's a big element. It's the amount of trust we have. And because of that trust, there's like, I've in all my years, I've never really worked on a deadline. I've never had a label being like, hey, you got to deliver this by this date. Never. Unless if I'm working on a remix, but I always deliver early. So it's like, it's the amount of trust. It's hard to come by, but when you have it, we try our best to nurture it and make it grow to something timeless as much as we can.
Do you think that trust was part of sort of what allowed you and Hudson Mohawke to leave the Tonight Project for a while after, you had this big explosion? Kanye's using your music. Higher Ground becomes, this crazy anthem in the EDM world, which is not even necessarily what you guys intended.
No,
and I'm sure there's a lot of money on the table at that point, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so
that's for sure.
To leave that and to be on good terms about it and to not, feel regret about that. Is it that trust that allowed you guys to do that?
Yeah, trust from the label and team. Hell yeah. Real trust, because we value health more than money, honestly. It's just, that's what it is. Because if you're not happy,
was there a thought that if you continued without stopping, your health or your happiness might take a hit?
Yeah, of course, because it's the, I guess what you would call the machine. It's almost inevitable once you're in it. It's like a specific type of momentum that you must be conscious of and sign up for. If you don't, then you might trip. And it's not fun when you trip because it's hard to get back up. And I'm very well aware of that, not because I've experienced it myself, but I'm a very observant guy that just looks at people's different experiences and try my best to not fall into that kind of path. And when it got to that point, we would have loved to, but it was just more of knowing if we jump the gun there, we lose our creative freedom in a sense.
Was it also part of, obviously there's the rise of EDM that we talked about. There's the EDM trap wave, which was sort of coming up at the same time.
Right.
And now that you're talking about this, I'm sort of realizing that if you had just continued Tonight in that vein, do you think that would have been sort of tacitly accepting that, okay, fine, we'll be a part of this movement that everyone wants to put us in, even though we don't feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the reason why whenever our name came up, well, the project's name came up, we would have Hudson Mohawke Lunice underneath, or Hudmo Lunice. It's to be specific in branding to subtly give the people the natural idea that it is two people in this project. So we don't want to force it. We're not trying to force anything right now.
Right.
We just want people to have their own interpretation over time. If they may not see it then, but they may see it later as they look back and they'll see, oh yeah, the two names. Oh, they both have their own respective projects. And I felt like that was the only way to keep some kind of consistency in terms of presenting the brand itself. But yeah, that's one way of just trying to make sure it didn't take over our whole process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, because I think about I'm one of my close friends is Kurt from Flostradamus.
Yeah,
and,
he's the coolest, man.
Oh, he's the best, man. And I think about their rise at the same time. They were kind of at the forefront of that EDM trap. I mean, they created the EDM trap.
No, they
sound.
did.
Yeah.
They did.
And I know
when I first heard that shit, I was like, holy fuck, this is crazy.
Yeah. And there was that energy, I think the same kind of energy you guys had with Tonight at the start, where it's just, I've never heard this. I don't know what to label this, all that kind of thing. And then, it took on a life of its own. And I think it's really only now, many years later, and I guess same for Tonight too, that I feel like people are starting to come back to, well, what made this cool at the start? How can we get back to that feeling of, when everything was free again?
Exactly. Yeah. Like the way it came back again was very natural. We just let it go for a while without much thought. That's the thing, is that I'm really not the kind of person to dwell on the past much in terms of like, oh, the good old days. I'm just a very much now person, and we'll see what happens next. Like I was saying, incremental. I can't think about the past too much if I'm trying to be step by step moving forward. By just spacing out the project, it gave us an opportunity to be, I guess in a way we were excited to have their project stopped, because then we can go back to our own, because there's nothing better than to have time for yourself to take care of yourself. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just talking to someone, think about like quarantine now,
Yeah,
even for
that's
the
what
people,
it is.
Even for the people who are on the ride, who are in the machine, as we're calling it, I mean, they are forced to stop now. And I think some people are finding that really therapeutic in a way.
So that's it. Stopping the project when it needed to be stopped just started to feel more therapeutic. And then we got into do our own thing. And what I believe though to this day is that the reason, because I decided to stop the project then after the Australian tour. And what I explained to the team is that if we stop the project, we then get to go back on our own work and grow as individuals and come back with a whole new take again. You know what I mean? Yeah. So not that it's like whole new sound, but like a whole new impression, like something that's evolved over time. Sure. And something that doesn't feel like we need to rehash just to bring back a certain momentum.
And I mean, how did that time evolve for you? How did you experience that? Because we're talking about, a period of 4 or 5 years, something like that.
Something like that.
And I mean, in that time, obviously you put out the 360 album.
Yeah. And he put out an album as well before that.
Yeah. And you went on tour with Madonna. You did some other sort of like just crazy side stuff.
Wild live stuff. Yeah. That Madonna tour was absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Probably what was that like? If I just say that, what springs to mind?
It was a very enlightening tour, which is crazy, because the reason how I end up on tour with her for most of that year was through her son and daughter, who thank you guys. guys are fans, and they just love the way I perform and the energy and everything. You know, I guess the genuineness of it all. And they thought that it might be cool to have this kind of personality or to be on stage to dance and perform for the crowd. And so she agreed. And I remember I was only booked for one show, and so I did that show in, I believe it was Vancouver, and big arena. Everybody was pretty much in at that point. So I go, and I remember before all that, when we were organizing the whole booking, she let me use her lighting rig.
Oh,
so
that's
I got
big, yeah.
It's crazy. So she let me use her lighting rig, and she let me run around left and right on the stage. Just obviously not on the walkway. Duh, I wouldn't do it myself anyways. Come on, I'm not gonna, who am I? So she gave me that freedom to just really present the whole thing. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm going all in. So I remember doing that show that first night. I did it. And while I was performing, I remember seeing one of the people come up on the stage and say, hey, I'm one of the dancers from Madonna. You mind if me and some of us come on stage to dance? This is crazy.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, what? Let's go. But mind you, her crowd is weirded the fuck out. But
you are not the typical Madonna opener.
No, I came in with my incense burner, and I come in with the smells, and they're like, what's going on with this guy? But it all made aesthetically sense because of what she was doing at the time, which was Rebel Heart. And it was all very much like necromancer-ish, medieval, with velvet red and blood, whatever it is. It was a wild look. So it's just coincidentally made sense for what I was presenting myself as. And I just remember them dancing on stage, so that got the crowd hyper, and it was all crazy. And I remember after doing my set, her manager comes up and says, hey, Madonna would like you to come in to do a prayer. And I'm like, sure. My mom's very Christian. She's very Catholic. She loves to pray a lot. Okay. She got me into being more spiritual. I could be spiritual. Why not? Let's go. So I go, and we're all here. We're on the circle holding hands. And then she comes out of her green room, and the first thing she says is, where's Lunice? And I'm just like, what? Did she just say my name? I'm like, nah. I just don't say a word. I just stay still just to see if it was for real. And then people are starting to look for me. And they're like, oh, he's over there. And she's like, oh, she comes up. So I'm like, okay, she's just going to say thank you for performing, whatever. And she grabs me and she hugs me and she looks me in the eyes and she says, I've never seen something like that. And I'm just like, huh? Wow. And I'm just like getting flashback of her and Basquiat and her and Tupac. Like, oh, it's like, dude, you've seen everything, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's amazing.
Blew my mind. And she was getting so hype off of the performance. She was basically saying like, you should just be on the rest of the tour. And then by the time I got back home, they already sent the offer for pretty much the rest of the tour, but I had to take it in chunks because I had my own tour as well. So I would go do my thing, and when I'm done, I go home for about a few days and I go on her tour. And it was such a fascinating thing because that whole like prayer wasn't really a prayer, but more of a way, because we would all hold hands in a circle, and then she would talk about she would always use this example of like, we're this little grain of sand in this whole world, and for us to be in this moment in time right now to make these people happy, we should feel so grateful for. So it was, every night was a moment of humbleness. She was always trying to talk about general humbleness, general humility, general things to want to push through and motivate yourself. And that was totally not what I expected.
Right.
It was amazing. It just gets everybody fired up, and everybody's about to go and like, yeah, let's go perform. And they just kill it. It's crazy. I've never seen such a massive organization of different workers to put together such a big show that work well all together. Everybody is pretty much smooth with each other. And like, so much so you'll go into backstage and the wires are amazingly organized.
Right. That's when there's different levels of professionalism, right?
Yeah.
And when you get to the upper echelon, like a Madonna tour.
It's like watching SpaceX launch. It's like these people who are just very, very, very focused and top of the line in their practice. Yeah. No matter what it is. I'd look at the tech people and be like,
It's wild, man. I actually, one of my high school friends is an engineer for SpaceX, and talking to him about, just how many recursive systems are built into those rockets, and, how many levels of fail safes there are, and the checks they have to go through. Maybe I shouldn't compare, a music tour to a
definitely
rocket,
not comparable.
Yeah.
But the feeling's somewhere around there.
Oh, man.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, in that time as well, I want to make sure I didn't gloss over the 360 album that you put out. When you're putting together an album and it's going to be sort of this cohesive project, how do you look at that differently, or how do you pair that with this mentality of kind of just being in the moment and doing what makes you happy that we were talking about before, when you're also thinking about, sort of creating this cohesive thing?
When I worked on the album, because my album, I worked on it for like a really long time. 5, 6, 7, I don't remember, like a lot of years. And it wasn't in the way that I kept working on it. It was more just, I wanted to live within it deeply. So by the time I'm back out to present myself to the public, whether it's through music or different art or stuff like that, I know exactly what I'm trying to say and express. And it's not just a blip in time for now, and that I'm this next.
That goes back to that deliberate versus reactionary thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I took it on myself to look beyond just my music, and it then became, what is my music within all this? What is my music within even the trap scene, stuff like that, and what is who I am within all this, my upbringing, and how things could be moving forward, and because I had the opportunity to. If things were moving too fast and I have to take care of things, I'll take care of it. But because I have this opening to be more, to go deeper into my conscious, I guess, I took the opportunity to go that route and build on that. And so the 360 started to piece itself together as the theatrical project it is, because of how I've just lived my whole career so far of my stage presence, keeping in mind the stage presence. Then I started thinking about stage design, then started thinking about different human senses. And that's when I started bringing scent into my shows and started bringing the incense to get people to smell before they hear music. Because that would then create a much more concrete impression. Even if you're in a smaller space, they'll remember who that was because of just the smell. And
especially, I think about, when I was a kid, you end up going to the same few venues over and over to see acts. And then if an act does something to transform that usual space that you're used to.
Exactly. Like I was saying, how can you do it in the most effective way without it being so grand and costly? And I was like, scent is so powerful. I can literally create whatever. And it makes people feel a certain way immediately. Oh, my grandma smells like, oh, it smells like it's the church. Oh, it smells like this time. And I love that because I hear that in the backgrounds.
Right.
Like, oh, it smells like that. Whoa, wait, what? It's so fun.
And that's a way that I never thought about this, but that's a way to immediately kind of get everybody in the room on the same page, right?
Because sudden, think about how comedians control the crowd. The moment they come on stage, it's go time for them. It's you got to control the room immediately. And you can control the room with sound, sure. I just tried to figure out another way because we have more than one sense. So
and the other senses, man, because if there's a smell in the room, I never really thought about this. If there's a smell in the room, even if people aren't paying attention to what's going on stage, everybody's smelling the same thing, right?
Yep.
And so in a certain way, that's a level of connection. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And I found that I like that idea that if you can design something if you can design something that can touch 3 out of the 5 usual senses that we know of publicly because I know there's more than 5. If you can touch 3 out of 5, it's an easier structure to follow. If you just follow the typical usual 5 senses that the main public knows about. If you can get the 3 out of the 5, you'll have a solid design overall, even if it's 2. So you can think of anything. I mean, I can see this hourglass, right? And it's like I have feel, sight, and then feel, sight already. Feel and sight. Right. Now I have this sight the whole time, and it's stimulating. Oh, now I have this. And then if it's big enough, or if it's silent enough, you'll hear. So it's like, oh, wow, okay.
Turn it over,
so it's like I sort of what I started to get into when I started just designing stage. And that's why for my stage, instead of using a lot of lights, I used a white curtain, because it came from the idea of watching old black and white films from my film days, and then seeing just a really grand, massive white curtain blowing in the wind, and just being like, that's a huge effect. And all it needs is wind. You know? And if you put light on it and it's a massive flame, sign me up.
Right. Yeah.
And then that's what I started using. I started just using one massive white banner behind me, have a fan behind it that my tour manager, who also would do the lighting, and he would trigger that and get it going. And that's how it would go.
And that's another way to stand out too, right? Is in all of this crazy, at least on the EDM side, you know, these production wars, people just trying to outspend each other, get the craziest technology. I mean, if you just, nobody's looking back, right? Nobody's looking at how they
I didn't
used
think about
to do
it like that.
Yeah. So I think that's another way. I mean, it makes me wonder, you know, we talked about EDM, we talked about the trap scene. You know, obviously we talked about your hip hop background. Now in 2020, if you look at yourself, do you feel like you're a part of any one scene? Do you feel like you're, you know, carrying the torch for any particular sound or style, or do you kind of enjoy being, you know, that hybrid or that hard to classify kind of artist?
I definitely enjoy being the hybrid. I definitely enjoy, because it's me enjoying people's freedom to think what they want, if you could put it that way. So I enjoy that more.
So if somebody tries to classify you as one thing or another, that doesn't bother you?
No, that's fine with me, because it's they need a label in order to conversate with something familiar. You can't conversate with a general subject. It's very hard. You just sort of go in circles, maybe. So I have that understanding and respect for that. And but for me, because life is just, there's no guides to this, so I keep it that way. I keep it very much open to interpretation.
You know, if we look at sort of the different scenes that you've touched, you know, either where you came from or where you went.
Yeah.
Do you, like, say, you know, when Tonight first blows up and all of a sudden you're playing big festival, like playing EDM shows, basically.
Exactly. EDM festivals.
Like, how did that change you and your process? Was there anything you were able to sort of take from that and learn and apply to what you would do later?
Well, it's pretty much what you just said. It's because I see myself outside of many of these different circles, it enables me to come into that scene and learn, rather than, you know, I have the torch. I'm
right.
That's such a wild idea. I hate that idea. It's like it's like reaching the peak of a mountain. And where are you going from there? Down?
Right.
Well, right. Probably.
Yeah. Well, and I think about that the same way that people who hold on to their accomplishments too long, because after a while, you get stuck there, you know? It's like everything else keeps moving on. But if you're still there holding on to whatever this thing is that you were able to do, it almost doesn't matter what that singular thing was, because in the end, everyone else will have moved on.
Yeah, exactly. And because of that, it makes me less stressed. So I feel more happy, genuinely happy because of it.
That's good, man. I mean, it's, I like talking to you, man, but it's making me calm down a little bit too. I mean, how has this time in quarantine been? You know, I think it's played havoc with a lot of people's mental state and 100%. Just this flip. How has it been for you?
So yeah, it's it's been good in the way that not much has changed in terms of lifestyle. I've always been homebodied, and in terms of music, I generally don't make much music even before all this, so it hasn't changed much, if anything, because I've always been working on my mental health. Even if I'm fine, but we're all human. It's being conscious that we are human. So there's a cap to all this. It takes work to not end up ignoring the fact that you are that, and you'll end up having a certain mental state at some point in your life. So I take preemptive action to make sure I'm on top of it without suppressing it. So I'll express and feel the certain feelings. Sometimes I'll feel like I'm worthless. Sometimes I'll feel like, oh, maybe I'm not good at these certain things. But then I consciously catch myself in that momentum, and then I backtrack and I start working on different things, whether it's meditation, exercising, yoga, drinking a lot of water.
Yeah, there we go, baby. Cheers.
Hydro homies, man. There's all these different tools. A lot of serotonin building tools. Like, I'm very grateful to be with my fiance, Jennifer. She's the greatest. And we've been together already 12 years now, and it flies. Oh, wow. I think it's 12 years. Yeah, it must be 12 years now.
So that's through the whole career journey.
My whole career. She's been there since the beginning. Like, she was already with me before I even took off. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It is. It's absolutely beautiful. It's rare. It's I would even say timeless in a way, because of the kind of relation could be seen throughout the ages, and people having good relations and trust and how they work well with each other. So it's like I take care of that and I'm well aware of it. I'm always grateful for it. And so this whole quarantine has been pretty much the ultimate test for all of us, for our own mental health and practices. It's pretty much testing us in ways of like, do you have a kind of practice to help yourself in these times? And this is it. And I've been grateful to say that I've built a good amount of tools to help myself get through. So my experience in general has been very grateful. That's the best I can say it.
Yeah, that's good, man. I think I was just talking to somebody about gratitude, and
right.
Yeah, I think that's what it all kind of comes back to, man, in the end.
Well, yeah, it's that, and there was a thing I really liked when I forgot who it was. Oh yeah, it was when Kevin Hart was talking to Joe Rogan on that podcast. He was talking about Dave Chappelle and why he's just so cool and calm and everything, and why he's just very happy in general. And Kevin Hart said it's because he's okay with not having. And that really resonated with me, because the way I explain my stage design, right. I'm okay to limit things. I want to see what happens if we limit things. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I'll take that even further to the story you told about when you were growing up with the house that was kind of falling apart.
Yeah.
And
let's see where it goes.
Yeah. And you ended up, being like, is this okay? Yeah, I guess it's okay.
Yeah. That too. Actually, it's a good point. Yeah.
That's interesting, man. I think
that really hit me, and I was like, yeah, I am. And that level of contentment might feel weird for some folks, is what I realize sometimes, because we're in such a culture of getting to such a high conclusion of high wealth, high representation, high everything.
Yeah.
That we end up thinking that's the only thing to get, when you could get it now for what you have around you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you're so right, man, because it's so easy, especially in the social media age, to see what everybody else has and to see how everybody else is living. Yeah. And to sort of forget that even if that looks nice, it still might not work for you anyway.
Yeah. Exactly. You might not. And so what was that all for? But honestly, you can't blame nobody, because, it's up to you to find that path over time.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And what does the path look like for you? Are you, obviously we talked about how you're very deliberate. You take your time with making music. Is there anything you're planning right now? Anything you're working on that you're excited about?
So it's been 3 months, I guess, since March, since I've been quarantining a lot, staying in a bunch, doing my life stuff. And I've only in the last week or so, 2 weeks, I've been making a bunch of music. And it's because I can only make music from a clear-minded place, where I have a clear mind, where I'm in a good place. I'm not the kind to make music if I'm sad. I'd rather go through my process of sadness and be conscious of it and, help talk about it.
Experience it.
Yeah. I'd rather experience it than suppress it and put it in something else. I'd rather experience it raw and then get inspired by the experience of it.
Right.
Right. I'll get inspired by the process of my sadness. And then that inspiration, it makes me happy. And then I make music.
That's beautiful, man, because that's definitely a thing. I think there's this sort of misguided idea about, the tragic artist or the troubled, dark artist. And sure, there's been plenty of troubled people who have made amazing art. But the problem is that if you decide that's the only way you can do it, that means you have to stay in that place indefinitely.
It puts you, exactly.
And that I don't think that's going to work out good for pretty much anybody.
No, it just never does.
Well, I love that, man. Going back to the ideas of just gratitude and health and all that, I really do think that's how to make this shit sustainable for those of us who are doing this for the long haul. Yeah,
that's the thing, man. It's like, I always find more creativity within limitations rather than having a carte blanche, free for all. Yeah. I could still create within that, sure. But I like the limitations I got. That's why I like staying on FL Studios, because it's very funky. It's the best way to describe it. It's the only way I can describe it. You find your way around it to get to a certain kind of idea. I love it. Hey, it's fun.
Yeah. Well, and you look at, that goes for so many things, man. You look at, how the original, techno coming from the 808 drum machine, which is not at all how it was supposed to be used.
Right. So how was it? Wait, actually tell me, how was it supposed to be used actually?
I might get this wrong the same way we were butchering quotes earlier, but
but I never knew.
In my mind, it was more meant to just kind of be like a plug and play sequencer kind of thing. Damn. And then people started, really stretching out these tones and pitching them way far down or way far up. And, just sort of using it in a way that the creators didn't intend.
Right. That's crazy.
And that's, man, wow. Out there in Detroit.
Damn. I love that idea. You use it in another way. It's like when, a few years ago, when a friend of mine, he brought in a selfie stick, and I was like, what are you doing with that? And I was like, wait, actually, give me that stick. And I started using it to get wild angles from places I couldn't reach, going back of the TV, you use your selfie mode and then see all the wires, and you're like, yo, there's so many uses. I love just reinterpreting things.
Yeah, man. And I feel like maybe that's another theme of your work throughout your career thus far too.
It has been, but a lot of the way I produce,
taking a familiar thing and just sort of flipping it,
using it in a different context. There's nothing that makes me more happy when, especially let's say for clothing, I'm not a guy that's into fashion like that, but I love to wear good clothes and to feel well, to look good. And, but it always fascinates me whenever I'm wearing, because I don't buy often. When I buy things, I like to keep it for a while. I like to grow with it.
I'm the same,
Right? And I have a lot of restoration, hardware kind of decoration stuff around the crib. And so I'm that kind of guy, a heritage kind of guy. And so it always makes me laugh when I walk down the street from time to time. And then you'll have younger clout looking folks with the Supremes. Yeah. No, they're cool. They're having fun. But it's fun. What's funny when they see my fit and they're like, yo, dope, high fashion. I'm like, bro, I had this for years. There's holes in this. I love it. And I'm happy you fuck with it now. Right. That's cool with me. It just makes me know that I have already had it.
Yeah. Well, the inspiration has to come from somewhere, right? There is, if you go back far enough, it is, just somebody was wearing something cool, right?
Exactly. Exactly that, man. It's crazy.
Well, this has been awesome, man. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Is there anything we haven't covered? Anything else that's on your mind? Anything else you want to let people know before we get out of here?
Well, working on more New Tonight stuff, that's for sure. Which is great because normally we work, we specifically made it that we would only work in studio together. We never would work remotely because we hate the idea. It takes too long. Send it over. He might be driving. Send it over. I might be like visiting my mom's or something. Yeah. You know, like it just takes forever to get anything done. But looks like our flow is great. Hasn't changed much. We got ideas going, and we're like, this is pretty fun. Cool. So we've just recently got back into it.
That's exciting, man.
Yeah, and working with different artists like rapper from the UK, Shy Girl. She's really cool. Just trying to connect with different other lesser known artists as well. Like I started a Discord channel recently and had a few people come through, and I had a call with one of them and we had a good talk, man. Just like pretty much like how we're having a talk right now. Very creative dude, 21. Artist name is Chuck Sutton. And
I know that name from somewhere.
Yeah, right. Like. Yeah, really dope producer and producer, singer, vocalist, creative. I don't know.
Yeah,
I consider him similar to me as just a general creative. Like he could just probably do what he wants, honestly. And he's 21. He's on the same wise tip as I am and was when I was 21 as well. So it's inspiring. And he put me onto a lot of stuff. Man, they all put me onto so much new shit, man. I've been listening to like a bunch of other crazy new Bailey funk type sounds.
Oh yeah, that's kind of coming back. I've been hearing some of that, dude. And I will say, just on the Discord note, man, because I just started a Discord myself recently.
Y'all want to join that?
Yeah. No, we should do a little Discord collab. But there's something about it, man. The community is so awesome, and I'm sure it's the same for yours as well.
Yeah,
they're putting me up on stuff.
They're information wizards, yo. Like they're on it. They may not think it, but they're the ones.
Yeah, 100%. Shout out to the Discord.
Yeah, man. Shout out new generation, man. Shout out Generation Z, man. They on it, man.
True.
Yeah. I'm back in
I'll wrap this up. I just asked the same question at the end of each one of these interviews. Just looking for a time in your life, a memory, a moment, could be from any time in your life when in a single moment, music really hit you, really had a deep impact on you, really meant something to you in that moment.
Easily, man. It was the time when I was walking down my hall when I was a kid, and my sister just opened the door, dragged me into the room. She was like, "We're doing this dance." I'm like, "What dance?" And it was the Backstreet Boys.
Oh, yeah.
Yo, she would always drag me into this music stuff, dancing stuff. So if it weren't for my sister, I wouldn't be doing what I do, for real. She introduced me to Wu-Tang, Redman, Method Man. Yo, she introduced me to all the crazy shit, man. She would blast that up, man. She blasts Wu-Tang all day, every day, yo. Yo, killing it. Just like TLC.
On the dancing too, right?
Yeah, mad dancing. She would do choreographies on choreographies. She would dress up like TLC with her and her homies and just kill it. My grandfather, because he was a tailor, and so he would tailor the fits exactly to what was in the music video.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he would buy the materials, get the picture, be like, all right, boom, 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 and that's what I knew. Like, yo,
oh man, that's fascinating. So you were actually thinking about the whole production of it from such a young age, from that,
dude. When I was like 8 or something, I used to create my own fake radio show by taking my grandfather's boombox, putting an empty cassette, recording it, and being like, "Hey, welcome to my show. So we're gonna da-da-da-da, and I'm gonna play this new song. And I'll make up an artist name and a title, and I'll flip it to FM, and it'll be whatever song's gonna be."
I love that.
And then I'll cut it out, and I'll be like, "That was totally wrong name, totally wrong song name, whatever it was." And I was in so many things, dude. Like,
That's an art project right there.
Straight up, dude. Like there was another one I used to, that was my kind of pastime when I was a kid. Like I would also gather friends of mine's to my place, and that was still in elementary school. And we would, I'm huge into RPG, right? Yeah, RPG games, Final Fantasy, all that shit.
Oh man, we might have to do another podcast.
Right? So my whole childhood has been about role playing, right? Just being a knight. Almost every other Halloween, I'm just as a knight. I just can't get away from it. I want to do that. That's the next thing. I have to do that next.
Hit me up. We'll talk.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's the next thing I want to get into. Okay.
I got a group. You're welcome.
Oh shit. That's crazy. Okay, so that's the next thing I got to get into. So basically that. Similar style, but just, you got your stick and you're doing the whole scenes. But then I started transforming that into another kind of more fun, creative idea where I was like, okay, let's gather. I'll start a scene. And I'll be like, da 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 da. Like say I'm walking down the street and I slip on a banana, but I'll freeze on the slip. And then my friend would have to replace me and continue that scene.
Oh, yeah.
And so we'll just laugh at each other. That was sort of us trying to create our own entertainment as goofing off and creating sketches. And that was like these little games. That reminds me of
like the improv scene.
Well, that's it. So when I backtrack, I was like, I was essentially creating improv with friends at like 9 or 10. It was so weird. And I was very creative. It was just not a thing within the family. It was just me and my sister. My grandfather and grandmother too. My grandmother plays the piano. My grandfather is a tailor, but he really draws well. It's just that they never took art as something that could be, but it makes sense. They needed to be more practical and in the times they lived in as well, especially.
Yeah. That's interesting. They took the art as something more practical in their own lives. And then you guys, the next generation, or I guess 2 generations down, are looking at it more as, no, my whole life is kind of that vibe.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. It comes down to generation and it's like a behavior trait you just pass down over time, and pretty much they've passed down all their creative little side projects onto me, and now I've made it into a career in a way.
Oh man. You think you're gonna have kids? You talk about that? You think about that?
Yeah, we definitely talk about it. Whenever we feel ourselves ready, we're definitely open. My sister has a daughter, so I'm an uncle, and that's great. So I get to be creative with her. I got into drawing a lot, so that's really fun. She's getting really good, and it's
I was gonna say, man, I think any kid that you have is gonna have a really fun childhood.
She's gonna be, I'm the weird one, no doubt. I'm just, because of my breakdance background, we'll play just funny little games, like opening the door, close the door, opening the door, close the door. And she'll open the door and I'm upside down. She's like, what the fuck? I just, what? Yeah. I try to give her these little moments of what?
That's beautiful, man. I think that's a good note to end it on, man. That just makes me smile.
Same.
Well, hey, man, this is really fun. I really like talking to you. Thank you for doing this.
Me too. Yeah, of course.
All right. Take care, buddy.
Bye.
All right, that's the show. Shout out to Lunice. Great to have you on, man. For everybody out there listening, don't forget, Lunice has a brand new song called Why Oh Why, which is out right now. It is off the Boost Tape '01 compilation. All proceeds from that are going to benefit Black Lives Matter, so it is for a great cause. There is a link in the description of this episode where you can go follow Lunice, grab the new song and the new compilation, and keep up to date with everything he's doing, because as you just heard, there's a lot to look forward to from the man himself. My name is Willy Joy. You can always keep up with me at Willy Joy or at BackToBackPod on all social media. BackToBackPod@gmail.com is the email address. And I want you to come join the Back to Back Discord server. There's also a link in the description where you can come hang out with me. I'm in there every day. Come chat with me. Come chat with the awesome members of our community. Come share your music. Come share music you're excited about. Give us some memes, Tell us what's going on in your life. And in general, I hope good things are going on, man. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying sane. I hope you are accomplishing some goals, seeing some successes, big or small. It doesn't matter. We got to celebrate them all when they come. And that's it, man. Lots more new episodes on the way. I don't know what's going on, man, but there's something in the water. I've been recording some really good ones recently. So stay tuned. Great shows coming up. I love you. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people around you. Have a great week, and I will talk to you next Tuesday. For Back to Back, this is Willy Joy. Peace.